Do join me in welcoming Ed Alstrom.
Well, thank you very much for being here. And I like to start things off this way.
Now you're invited to sing along as Ed Alstrom plays "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
Yes, that is me playing my first season at Yankee Stadium, which was 2004. And anybody know the voice that announced me?
Bob Shepard.
Bob Shepard. Robert Leo Shepard, esteemed public address announcer at Yankee Stadium for 56 years. We're going to talk a lot more about Bob Shepard later on because I got a lot of Bob Shepard stories. So, this is a picture of me on the scoreboard at the new Yankee Stadium, which opened for business in 2009. And the way that picture comes about is I get a spot to play organ, a feature spot, usually 45 minutes before the game starts. So if it's a 1 o'clock game, my pregame spot will start at about 12:15 and go till about 12:30. During that spot, I can play whatever I like. For the first 90 seconds or so of that spot, there's a cameraman down by the organ, which is in Delta Suites behind home plate, and they pop me up on the scoreboard. There's a little graphic that says Ed Alstrom tickling the ivories at Yankee Stadium for however many years it is, and then they just leave me up there. I'm usually playing New York, New York. I'm almost always playing New York, New York at that point because I open every pregame spot. With that as an homage to my predecessor, the great Ed Layton. And so that's what that picture is from. It's a pregame spot. As you can see, there's not a lot of people in the stands at that point, but that's okay. Same thing happened at the old stadium, and you see the scoreboard technology was quite a bit different then. They still had the light bulbs on a scoreboard up then, and they were just starting to dabble in these diamond vision things. You'll see that this was taken on Old Timers Day, and this is probably 2004 as well. On this particular Old Timers Day, they brought in Eddie Layton to sit alongside me and just make sure I got through it okay. So he kind of supervised me that first Old Timers Day I did, and we shared the organ bench and split the time, and that was quite a thrill. And here's me. I can't seem to enlarge this picture, but you get the idea. I'm about 7 or 8 years old in that picture, which was taken at my home in Ridgewood, New Jersey, where I grew up. And I was an organ player as a young boy because we didn't have a piano. My dad was an organ player. He also played accordion, and I exhibited some musical talent early on. And I was offered the organ or the accordion as a choice. Since we didn't have a piano, I chose the organ. And things went from there, and I was playing at a very young age. I was taking lessons when I was 5. I gave my first public performance a couple of weeks before my 6th birthday, and I was like a little child prodigy. So I was born to be an organ player. I don't do anything else really that well. My dad, pictured here, was a plumbing and heating and air conditioning guy who had fantastic chops at that. He could fix anything. He was also a carpenter and general handyman and any number of things. He could fix anything. And but he was also a musical talent. He never did it professionally. He always did it recreationally. But he could do some things that I've known a lot of musicians that can't do. I used to go with him on plumbing jobs and hand him tools and just hang out with him. He'd always have a radio alongside, and he'd always have music on. So he'd be laying under somebody's boiler, welding something like you see here. And song would come on the radio, and he'd say, "Edward, what's this song?" I'd tell him the name of the song. And we'd work for 5 or 6 more hours, get in the truck, go home, he'd take a shower, go eat his dinner, go to the organ at 8 o'clock that night, play the song. Edward, is this the song we heard this afternoon? And, yeah, Dad. Now, I came to realize later on in my late teens, when I started interfacing with a lot of other musicians and getting serious about playing music, I don't know anybody that can do that. Hear a song once, and then 10 hours later go and play it. He couldn't read music. He didn't know how, didn't want to learn. He just knew thousands of songs like in his head, presumably from hearing them once, which is quite a talent to have, especially if you're really good at something else and you don't do music for a living. So I did not get his mechanical ability, I'm sad to say. I have trouble hammering a nail in the wall without incident, but I got the ears from him. I could play music. And that's him doing what he really loved for recreation. This organ, which is a Hammond Model B3, built in 1960, classic organ. He had it in his home. He traded some plumbing services or something for it. I think he put in somebody's boiler, and he gave him a Hammond B3 and a Leslie in return. So that organ is now worth $6,000 or $7,000. It lives in my basement. It will stay there forever. I'm not moving it. I play it all the time. I record on it, and I love it, and it's still there, and it's still mine. And Dad and that organ will always be with me. Now here's another organist of note. Anybody know who that is? That is my predecessor, the great Eddie Layton. Eddie Layton was the organist at Yankee Stadium between 1967 and 2003. He was not there for all of that time because he was the prominent Hammond organ clinician for the entire world. So he was always traveling around the globe demonstrating and concertizing on Hammond organs for them, as well as all the other things he did. So he was at Yankee Stadium kind of when he could be there. It turned out to be most of the time, but it was the better part of 37 years. Eddie Layton is thought by some people to have been made a star when he got to Yankee Stadium, and that's a fallacy. He was a star before he got to Yankee Stadium. In the world of pop organ, which was a force in the 1940s and 50s, Eddie Layton was at the top of that heap, along with people like Ethel Smith, Lenny D., Klaus Wunderlich, Don Baker, George Wright. Organists had a pocket of great popularity. And Eddie Layton was right in that group. He released numerous albums, most of them in the late 1950s, most of them on the Mercury label. And as you can see, they had some crazy cover art. He liked his animals in his album covers. And you see the top right one called Better Layton Than Ever. Get it? All right, so, and these Layton albums, you can't get anymore. They were never put on digital. They exist, and you'd have to track down the vinyl, which I've done. I own every single one of them. And Eddie Layton had a talent that I never heard any organist have, in that he could replicate sounds on a Hammond organ. Now, a Hammond organ is a fairly limited instrument in terms of the things it can do, because you're pulling out drawbars with different frequencies to try to create sounds. But nobody really ever used the thing to try to mimic other instruments or sounds in nature. And that was Layton's stock in trade. He could do that brilliantly. So Layton could mimic a train coming down the tracks, a fire, a storm, birds chirping, earthquakes. He could imitate a trombone, a banjo, an upright bass. He just had this ear for imitating sounds and pulling the right drawbars to replicate them on a Hammond organ, which is remarkable. Nobody else could do that. So he brought that skill set with him wherever he went. And Layton's got even more famous after that when he was hired by CBS TV to play live organ on a soap opera called The Secret Storm. Anybody remember that? Sure you do. Don't lie. The Secret Storm was a very popular soap opera in the early 1960s, and it had a soundtrack of Eddie Layton playing the organ live. So that's what he did. So he was an employee of CBS TV. CBS bought the New York Yankees in 1966. The Yankees already had an organ player in place. Now, and it wasn't Eddie Layton. That's another fallacy, is that people think Layton was the first organist at Yankee Stadium. He was not. The Yankees hired an organist named Toby Wright to play at Yankee Stadium starting in 1965, and it was in response to the Mets opening Shea Stadium in 1964 and having an organist there, who was also a brilliant one. Her name was Jane Jarvis. So in answer to Jane Jarvis playing at Shea, the Yankees countered with Toby Wright playing at Yankee Stadium. 2 years later, after CBS took over, they asked Layton to be the organist at Yankee Stadium. Layton knew nothing about baseball. His famous quote is, "I thought a sacrificed fly was an insect." But he learned baseball very, very quickly and became one of the greats of stadium organ, and he's copied and emulated by all of us to this day. So how do I enter the picture? My dad started taking me to baseball games when I was 7 or 8 years old. He took me to both teams' games. He took me to a Met game first, but then later that year took me to a Yankee game. And I was already playing the organ, so I fell in love with baseball immediately, as many of us did. And then I walked in that stadium and I heard the organ. I'm like, wow, Dad, organ, baseball, I want to do that. I'm 7 years old. I never dreamed that 40 years later I would be doing that at Yankee Stadium. So it's funny how childhood dreams somehow happen. So let me explain how this one did. After the 2003 season, it became common knowledge that Layton was going to step down. He was hedging. He had health issues, but he didn't want to leave. So he didn't really give them notice until very late in the game, right before the 2004 season started. So by now, it's about a month before the 2004 season is going to start, April of 2004. So we're in March of 2004. Now, the winter of 2003, I don't know if you remember, is one of the most brutal on record. It snowed like every other day, a foot. They would clear it another foot 2 days later. And you couldn't park anywhere in Manhattan because there was 12-foot high snowbanks every place. And I was working in Manhattan all the time, subbing on Broadway shows and doing gigs in New York and driving to New York 5-6 nights a week, and it was tough. So I got done with that winter and wondering what I was going to do. And then we get word definitively that Layton is stepping down and the Yankees are going to have a new organist somehow. And my wife is like, well, you got to go for this. You know how to play. You know Layton. You know the style. You're a big baseball fan. You got to go for this. My wife's a real go-getter. Right? And I'm like, Max, I don't know anybody there. It's not like this job was posted in a want ad and you went after it. It was just out there. And presumably you had to know somebody to get it in. I said, I don't know anybody there. How am I going to? I'll tell you what, you go after it. And she did. So she made a phone call, one single phone call, and she got through to the head of marketing, who put her through to the head of broadcasting and scoreboard operations. And my wife talked me up to this gentleman, my friend Mike Bonner, and he said, okay, have him fax us a resume. Remember faxes? That's how you communicated back then. So we faxed a resume in, and lo and behold, get a call back, say, we'd like to hear you play. So I drove in to Yankee Stadium. This is probably the second or third week in March, about 2 or 3 weeks before the season is going to open. There's 10 feet of snow on the ground. It's about 20 degrees out. I get to the stadium. The field is covered with snow. So I enter Yankee Stadium. Mike meets me, and he walks me upstairs to the Yankee Stadium organ booth, which is pictured behind you here. Now, I'm saying to myself, just doing this audition is pretty cool. Like, I'm really not going to get this job. Who am I kidding? But at least I could say I played the Yankee Stadium organ. So I was ready to content myself with that. And out of nowhere appears Eddie Layton. He's going to audition me. I am going to take you through exactly how the audition went. So I sit down at the Yankee Stadium organ. Okay. and turn the organ on. The organ works. I'm sitting there in a parka because there's no heat and it's about 20 degrees out. And Leighton's standing in the doorway of the booth in a parka. And he goes, all right, let me hear a little New York, New York. All right, that's good. Give me a little happy birthday. Okay, that's fine. A little national anthem. Okay, that's fine. Canadian national anthem. It's fine. It'll take me out to the ball game. Okay, that's fine. Give me a little fanfare. Okay, we're done. I'm like, really? That's all? You don't want to hear anything else? He said, no, we're good. So he walked away, and Mike came back and walked me out and said, we'll let you know what happens. And a few days later, I get a call on my cell phone. I was walking around Manhattan, working there, and it's Mike from the Yankees. We have a guy who's going to do Monday through Fridays, and we need somebody to do Saturdays and Sundays. Would you like to be the weekend organist at Yankee Stadium? To which I felt like saying, I'll pay you to let me do it once. But I said, no, I would love to. I'd be honored. So that's the arrangement. I play Saturdays and Sundays, an occasional weekday here and there. It's fine. It's an honor. It's a childhood dream. And I'm thrilled to do it. So they gave me a little name plaque. They put me in Leighton's booth, which had about 5 keyboards and a drum machine in it. Some of the stuff was hanging from the ceiling, like this keyboard back here, you see, which was literally pinned to scaffolding. And you had to reach up like this to play it. But he played it. In the old stadium, the organ was located in the scoreboard booth, which was adjacent to the press box. So we went up to the second level and went in through the press box entrance. And instead of making a left to go there, we make a right to go to the scoreboard area. So I've always been part of the scoreboard operation. And that's the newer picture of the booth. And that's an even newer picture of it in the old stadium. Eddie Leighton passed away the day after Christmas in 2004. Of natural causes at age 79. And after that, they put this picture up of him and christened this the Eddie Leighton Memorial Organ Booth. Who's that guy? That is Robert Leo Shepard, the aforementioned public address announcer at Yankee Stadium, and my next door neighbor, okay? If you look at this picture, the booth behind me, separated by some plexiglass, was Bob Shepard's booth. So we were neighbors in the old stadium, and we made the most of that relationship, as I'll get to later. So that's Shep in probably 2004, 2005, with my 2 daughters who are now 35 and 30. So tells you how long ago that picture was taken. And this is me on the scoreboard at the old stadium. Anybody remember this guy? Freddie Says. This is Freddie Schulman, and he used to walk around the stadium with this frying pan and this big spoon, and he would hand them to people, and they would just bang the pan with the spoon. Simple as that. Simplest form of entertainment imaginable. But whenever you heard that sound of a huge spoon banging on a cast iron pan, you knew somebody had Freddie nearby. That's what Freddie did. Now, in addition to that, which would have been quite enough, he also had a newsletter, which was called the Freddie Says newsletter, as you can see here, published infrequently. And it was 4 or 5 or maybe 6 pages, and just had little stories and stuff like that. And Freddie was just a primo Yankee fan, one of the great ones. And if we were out there in those days, we all remember him. He passed away in 2011. That's a shot from the Stadium after a game in which there was a private party that we stuck around for, and we were able to go on the field after the game, so had to get somebody to get that shot because it's the only time I've ever been in the dugout. And it was my wife and I on the field from that night. At the old stadium, we parked in a lot where the players also used to park in, so we would occasionally run into the players on the way in. And I would always walk under this facade saying, I want to thank the good Lord for making me a Yankee. And I would always get a little chill walking under that. That was a quote from the great Joe DiMaggio. This is a picture of Alex Rodriguez in 2007 hitting his 500th home run at Yankee Stadium. The reason this shot is in here is this is not a press photo. This is a photo my wife took at the moment it happened. I don't know how she knew this was going to happen, but she had a camera trained on A-Rod the minute he took the swing, and he's looking down the left field line to see if the ball's going to go fair, because if it's fair, it's a home run, and it was his 500th home run lifetime. He hit his 600th 4 years later in 2011, and that was at Yankee Stadium as well. Okay, all right, this is a fairly special moment. The old Yankee Stadium closed down in 2008. The last game at Yankee Stadium was late September of 2008. It was a Sunday night game against the Baltimore Orioles. The Yankees had not made the playoffs that year for the first time in, I think, 14 years. So the game didn't really mean anything to either team, but it was going to be the last game at the old Yankee Stadium. Everybody knew it because the new stadium across the street was nearly completely erected, and this was going to be it for the old Yankee Stadium, where we all grew up with our memories. The place was mobbed, of course, and they asked me a couple of days before this game. They said, we need you to play a song at the end of the game. As soon as the game ends, we're going to announce it, and then you're going to play this song called Goodnight Sweetheart. Now, you're thinking the same thing I thought. It's the old doo-wop song by the Spaniels. Good night, sweetheart, it's time to go. Yeah, it's not that song. It's a different song. Completely different song. It was from the 1930s. It was originally recorded by Guy Lombardo. I had to go to great lengths to find this out. Back in 2008, you couldn't just get on the internet and get on Google and find out whatever you wanted to find out. It was a lot more. It was the old days when we had to dig out encyclopedias and talk to people who were there and things like that we don't do anymore. But my source of information with this was a fellow named Bill Shannon. Anybody know that name? Bill Shannon was the official scorer at most Yankee games for a long, long time. He was kind of a neighbor of mine, lived in Caldwell, New Jersey, so I would see him every now and then around town. I would always see him out at the stadium. He was the official scorer. So he would score the game and make decisions on whether something was a hit or an error, was a wild pitch or a pass ball, things like that. Those are in the official scorer's jurisdiction. So Bill Shannon did that kind of thing. So he knew his baseball, but he was also a savant about nearly everything. Bill Shannon knew stuff about things that you can't even imagine. So I said, he's going to know. So I went up to him and said, Bill, you know this song called Goodnight Sweetheart? Not the one about the Spaniels. No, not that one. Yeah, this other one. It was Guy Lombardo recorded it in 1932, and then Kay Kaiser covered it, and there was other versions of it in 1933. It went to the number 5. He knew everything about the song. So then I just had to find it. Fortunately, I found an old book that belonged to my dad that he bequeathed to me called 1,000 Standard Tunes, and it was in there. So I had the song. So as soon as the game ended this night, and you can imagine how people felt. This is people there that have been going to Yankee Stadium for 30, 40, 50 years, and this was the last time they were going to see this building or be in this building. So they figured the game ends, people are going to just listen to this song, and then they're going to start to file out. So here I am playing Goodnight Sweetheart as soon as the game ended. get the idea. People are milling around. After I finished that song, Sinatra's version in New York came on. They figured people would start to file out. Nobody left for like an hour. People were just standing around, sitting around, soaking it all in. They wouldn't leave. After they finally did leave, about an hour and a half later, by now it's like midnight, and we're still hanging around. We were having a little party up in the scoreboard booth. And then the boss says, come on, we're all going to go on the field. So I get this clever idea. I'm going to find a little cup, and I'm going to get a little cup of dirt from the pitcher's mound. It's a clever idea, right? So we go on the field. I get out to the pitcher's mound. The pitcher's mound is bald. It's just a white dome. Mariano Rivera had been out there with a bucket and a shovel and had gathered every speck of dirt off the pitcher's mound. There was nothing there. So I thought, I was going to get some dirt from somewhere else. So I got a cup of dirt from like the warning track or something and went home with that. So we were hanging out on the field for a long time, and then we went to a couple of bars that night. We all got home at like 6 in the morning. We had a really good time. So that was the end of the old Yankee Stadium. Okay? The only thing that's left of the old Yankee Stadium is what's called the Bat, which is a big smokestack looking thing. I don't know if it was actually a smokestack or not, but it looked like one. And it was a place which people would congregate at. They had tickets, and they were going to have a meeting place at the stadium. I'll meet you at the Bat. And everybody knew where the Bat was. That's all that's left of the old stadium now. The rest of it is a municipal field, which is what the new stadium was before the new stadium went up. Now, we get to the new stadium. So this is 2009. And I'll give you a little pictorial of what my average day goes like logistically here. I park in this lot, which is right adjacent to the stadium, 164th Street, and I go in through this gate, gate 2, where many of the employees go in through. And I swipe my card and go into the building on this elevator. A big picture of Babe Ruth that also scrolls into a picture of Joe DiMaggio with the old quote, I want to thank the good Lord for making me a Yankee. And this over here is a statue of George Steinbrenner. So I go up this elevator to the second floor, I get off, make a right, I walk down this hallway, and that's the view of the field I have as I'm walking in. And I go in through this door, which goes right through the press box. And there's a view of the press box. That's where the writers sit. Right here is where the official scorer sits. So that's where Bill Shannon and his successor, Howie Carpin, most of the time, they sit here and they do the official scoring of the game, have a great view of the field. This is our little commissary / cafeteria up here. It's called Shepherd's Place, named after Bob Shepard, of course. Look at this, a chalkboard. It's still there. They will never get rid of it. It's the chalkboard from the old stadium where they write the lineups on. It got transported to the new stadium, and there it is. And somebody's up there with an eraser and some chalk every day putting new lineups up there. This is the scoreboard area, so I walk in through this door because I'm there to get my information for the game I need to play. So I walk down this hallway into the control room, okay? Now, if you've ever been to games, you've seen, no doubt, that stuff goes on the scoreboard. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on all the time. I'll bet you don't give any thought to how that stuff gets up there. And I know that because I never did until I started working there, and I said, wow, this is how this stuff gets up there. Okay? There's a whole team of people. You know how on a news broadcast like on CNN or something you see all these people working in the background and screens and all kinds of people doing different things? That's what this is like. So there's probably 15 or 20 people in this area and stationed at various points remotely that are under the control of the director here, who we're all on headset to, who's telling us how he wants things to go. So the director sits here, the producer sits next to him and mans the control. Also in this booth are people manning replays, people manning character generations. There's a guy that just does balls and strikes, and they call him the balls and strikes guy. So that's what your gig is. When it says BSO, ball strikes and outs, there's one person that just does that. That's their whole job. And there are various types of other people doing other things. There's people doing audio who I'm in touch with. They basically supervise me, tell me when and sometimes what to play. and audio is under the control of the director as well. So that's how it goes down, the scoreboard, and it's all planned out, all right? There's very little that's left to chance. Naturally, it's a game, so at times you're going to get points where we got to figure out something to do. You got to think quick. But for the most part, it's very planned out. This gentleman's name is Paul Olden. He is the current public address announcer at Yankee Stadium. He started that job when the new stadium opened in 2009. Now, my experience with Paul Olden goes back well before that. You may or may not remember this, but I do. Paul Olden was the Yankees' lead play-by-play guy on TV for one season in 1992. And I remember him from that. So he just popped in, did a year, and then he was off to other things. I found out what one of those other things was about 5 years later when I was in Tampa. And I'm driving around. I was on a business trip. And I turned on the radio during the day, and I scanned around and found there's a Rays game was on. So I'm listening to the Rays game. This voice sounds familiar. It was Paul Olden. He was the radio play-by-play guy for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays at the time, starting in their inaugural season, 1977. And now he's back at Yankee Stadium, 2009, and in Bob Shepard's old job as the public address announcer, and he does a lovely job. The only reason I'm mad at him is because he's in my old booth. When we first got to the new stadium in 2009, his booth, which is dead center behind home plate, is where the organ was. I had a fabulous view of the field. I love that booth. And then in 2012, they moved us down to Delta Suites, which we'll get to later on. That's the WFAN booth, where until recently, you see these two people. John Sterling on the left, Susan Waldman on the right. John Sterling has been the play-by-play voice on radio of the Yankees since 1980 and recently retired, beginning of this year. He did a few games at the beginning of the year. And then at age 85, he figured it was finally time to step down. And it was not because he couldn't do the games. He was brilliant at doing the games. It's just getting back and forth to the games and getting up and down in the stadium, which you do a lot of walking around. That became a chore for him. He said, once I'm doing the games, I'm fine, but I just can't get to and from the games anymore. So Sterling stepped down. Susan Waldman, as you may know, has been his sidekick since the year after I started. She got there in 2005. And Susan is a legend in her own right, not because only she was one of the first female sportscasters. And back in the days before it was fashionable, she was subject to a lot of abuse and a lot of mistreatment, and she endured that with great strength. But she's also a breast cancer survivor. She's a tough cookie and a very nice woman. And she's still there. Sterling's enjoying his retirement. You can still hear his voice on the fan, on WFAN, because they're using him to do a lot of commercials and reads and things these days. So he's not out of the picture entirely. And his voice will never be forgotten because he'll always turn up on those World Series clips and those Yankeeographies and everything you hear. One of the great play-by-play voices of all time. That's the Yes booth where they do the TV broadcast from, Michael Kay and all those former players he gets to hang out with. So then I get the papers I need out of the control room and I walk down these steps and take one last look at the field before I go into my home, my office at Delta Suites. This is a seating area right behind home plate on the second level. These seats did not exist in the old stadium. There was no seating on level 2 behind home plate. It was all press box and scoreboard and offices. But they put all that stuff above and then put seating below it, and boy, are they good seats. You know, you sat there, right? So I go through this door, make a right, there's the organ. So it's on the left field side of Delta Suites. Oddly enough, not everybody in Delta Suites knows the organ is there. In fact, I'd say a very small percentage of people in Delta Suites know the organ is there. Certainly, people that are on the right field side of Delta Suites never get down to the far end, so they have no idea the organ is there. But there it is. And that's my office. That's the organ. This organ, in particular, was installed in the old stadium in 2007, I think the year before we left there, because its predecessor got wheezy and difficult to get parts for. So it became too unreliable to continue with, so they had to get rid of it. And we'll get a little more into that instrument later on. But this is the newer organ. It's an early 2000s Hammond. It's all digital. It uses the newfangled technologies, but uses them brilliantly, and it's a very versatile, very playable instrument. On top of it is a Yamaha keyboard that I use for drum beats and special sound effects. Now, this is my lifeline to the game. This screen over here. On this screen, do I have the picture on? No, I don't have it on here. All right. So on this screen, I'm getting different quadrants. So these will be views of the game. This will be a view of the pitch clock, which I now need to be cognizant of. And this is a view with the scoreboard showing me a line score, what goes on, what inning, and balls and strikes, and the score of the game. I can't see the game live. I'm reliant on this screen to tell me what's going on, because I'm on this headset you see here, and I'm watching this screen. Because when I was up in the booth, the first 3 years we were at the new stadium and the whole time at the old stadium, I had a magnificent view of the field. There's one thing I couldn't see, and that was the right field foul pole. It's the only thing I couldn't see. With this view in the new stadium, the only thing I can see is the right field foul pole. So that's what it looks like to me when I look at the field. That's all I can see is the right field foul pole. This is Delta Suites. It's a wonderful place to sit. It's rather like a large lobby of a Hilton or something like that. You've got all the amenities you could want. Soft drinks, popcorn, peanuts, etc., all free. They have this fabulous coffee machine, which works about 60% of the time. Usually has a sign on it that says it's not working. There's a sushi bar there, really good. And they have all kinds of food there. They have a huge bar. You can get drinks, get everything you need in Delta Suites. And they have this fabulous outdoor seating area with these bistro tables. And if you get there early enough, you can stake out on one of these. But be careful for foul balls, because they come whistling back there. That's another view from Delta. Now, this is the paper I went up to the control room to get. This is my pregame rundown. As you can see, this particular one is from the one World Series game I had an opportunity to play, which was Game 1 against the Phillies in October 2009. But they all look the same here. This is a pregame rundown to the minute of what's going to go on before the game. So what I'm looking for here is where it says Alstrom plays organ. There it is. It tells me what time I'm playing. My spot was a little shorter this day because it was a World Series and there was a lot of festivities going on and stuff. Normally my spot is 12 to 18 minutes, depending on what they've got going on. So that's when I play. And then I have to look down here and see if there's anything else I'm on the hook for. Oh, look at this. Olden organ flourish. Okay, when there's a first pitch, when the person throws the pitch, I usually have to play some kind of a fanfare or some kind of a hopefully witty song that's related to their organization or to their name or something like that. So I got to look for that. And then other than that, I just have to be ready for anything that could go on here. It tells me when the national anthem's happening. And again, this is scripted. Okay, this is down to the minute, and this holds. This timing is real. Okay. Then once the game starts, there's another rundown, although they can't put times on this one because it's a game. So you don't really know what exactly is going to happen. But we do know that at the end of every inning, when there's a third out, I'm going to play some kind of a little 10-second bumper to get the people off the field. And we do know that in the 6th inning, I'm going to play Happy Birthday. And we do know that in the 7th inning, I'm going to play Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Other than that, it's a game. So we don't know what's going to happen. I've got to be paying attention at all times because anything can and will happen. Give you an example. In 2005, a game against the Cleveland Indians, they're playing Cleveland's batting, and in left center field, there's a door in the outfield wall that they open and bring in grounds crew equipment through, lawnmowers and devices to cure the field. Okay. During that bat, that door just flew open. It's a big door too, and the door flew open, and I didn't see it at first, and then I just heard my boss go, Alstrom, play something. All right, what am I going to play? I don't know how this popped into my head. I thank the muses for it, but I just hit the Yamaha and turned on a beat and started playing. Anybody know what that song is?
Break on through.
Break On Through to the Other Side by The Doors. And believe me, I didn't think of that. It was just like inhabited me, and I just started playing that. Sometimes you get lucky. All right, but that was proof. I knew right then. I said I got to be paying attention all the time, which is why people come up to me at Delta Suites. I can't talk to them if I'm in the middle of the game because I'm going to miss something. I start talking to this person and I'll hear Alstrom, and I'm not going to know what it is. And you don't want to miss cues. Okay, so if you come up to me at the Yankee Stadium, you can get your way into Delta Suites, and you come over by the organ, and I have my back to you with this huge headset on, that's the reason for it. I'm not trying to be antisocial, but I really got to stay with it every moment of every game because anything can happen. Just 2 weeks ago, okay, there's a stoppage in play, and I see both managers come out, and they're talking to the umpire, and I have nothing on my TVs to indicate what's going on. And then the guy in audio says to me, Alstrom, play something about birds. And then this picture appears on the Yes feed of like a pigeon or something just sitting on the field, like it's disabled, like it can't move. So I'm like, well, what the heck am I gonna play? First thing that came to mind. You know that song. Yellow Bird. What's the first thing that came to mind? I wish I'd have thought of Free Bird. I wish I'd have thought of Fly Like an Eagle. But I had to play the first thing that popped into my head because if you're 2 seconds late, you're too late. Especially now with the pitch clock. Okay? Because if they go Alstrom, I gotta jump right in there. It can't be Alstrom. Let me think about it. No, the moment's gone. So that's what life is like. All right? And it's okay. As a result, I have a list that looks like this. This tells me bumpers, which are things I'll play as the teams are going off the field. I learned early on what kind of music I wanted to use for this. We have any jazz buffs here? Okay. I'm a huge jazz buff. I'm a huge bebop fan. I learned that bebop songs, such as those written by Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, people like that, make perfect end-of-inning bumpers. Bang! Team's off the field. Yardbird Suite by Charlie Parker. All right. So this is a list of bebop and jazz songs that I'll use for those bumpers. And this way, if I draw a blank, I could just look at the list and come up with something. Okay, now the cheers. All right. Part of my job is to cheer the Yankees on to score some runs and get some hits and get some base runners and make things happen. Now, us stadium organists traditionally have a rather limited repertoire of what we normally draw on. Of course, there's, you know that one. Of course, there's, of course, there's, so out of the traditional things, there's like a dozen things or so, maybe 15, that are standard fare. And these are what I took to the stadium with me originally, thinking, oh, this will get me by. And it did for a while. The way I found out it wasn't gonna was when I started playing some minor league games. Because at Yankee Stadium, in the early days, I was playing maybe 20% of the time. It's grown to like maybe 35 or 40% of the time now, but I'm not playing all the time. A lot of times there's pre-recorded music being played, so I'm splitting time with that. When I started doing minor league games for a team called the Rockland Boulders, anybody familiar with them? In Pomona, New York, up in Rockland County. They're now called the New York Boulders. They asked me to come play some games for them when I wasn't doing Yankee games on weeknights. I said, yeah, sure. So I got there, and I found out quickly that it was all on me, that there was no pre-recorded stuff that I was alternating with. So I ran through that whole repertoire by like the third inning. I was like, what am I going to do now? I better get some other stuff to play. So I started to think, what else can I use here that would be interesting and would pump people up? And I tried. And I started with a. And you put a little drum beat behind that, it works really well. Great. Okay, so we got a list of rock and roll songs now. Here. Now, it kept expanding and expanding, okay? Then I started listening to a lot of hip hop and rap because as much as we think hip hop and rap doesn't have melody to it because it's people rapping, there's a lot of hip hop and rap tunes that have very identifiable and very catchy melodies. All right, so I play a lot of those now, because the newer players all have that kind of genre as their walk-up music too. So during their at-bats, I'll play a lot of that. Ominous. This category arose 2 years ago when all of a sudden, with 2 strikes on an opposing batter, they said, Alstrom, play something ominous. Okay. Okay, next inning, 2 strikes on a batter, 1 out. Alstrom, play something ominous. All right. And it became a thing, and now I do it all the time. So I have a list of those too. And this is just so I don't draw a blank. And I always try to have something in mind before the moment hits, because that's what you got to do. This is called the Great Hall, which is right off Jerome Avenue. It's the first thing you come to. First sight of the stadium you see when you're on Jerome Avenue is you come to this gate 4, and you go in through the Great Hall entrance. A buddy of mine shot this picture while we were walking through the Great Hall. I had no idea I was on TV down there. I was playing my pregame spot. He said, yeah, I snapped this picture of you. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm getting around. And my 6th season at the Hammond Organ was our first season at the new stadium. Picture me on the big board. This is me alongside the World Series trophy from 2009, where I was at the Sheraton Hotel in New York City to play at the homecoming dinner. And we'll get to that in a moment. First of all, this is a scene from the parade down the Canyon of Heroes in 2009, where all us scoreboard people were invited to be on a special float. And I think we don't get a lot of these around here, but I think you know how they work. There's a parade from, I forget what the starting point is, but it's about
72nd Street.
Is it that far up?
Yeah.
Because it goes, I don't think so. It goes all the way down to Battery Park.
Yes,
I think it's more like 14th Street or something like that. But it goes all the way down to Battery Park, and different people are on different floats. So ownership's on the first float, and then you get to the players, and people go mad, and then they have all the rest of us kind of worker bees behind them. But here I am on the World Series float, and we had to get to the stadium at like 6 a.m., and then they put us on a bunch of buses, and they drove us down the West Side Highway at about 8 o'clock in the morning and closed the West Side Highway. We were on the West Side Highway by ourselves. There was no other traffic. It was all rerouted. So that must have been a heck of a morning if you were commuting into New York. But it was weird driving down the West Side Highway in daylight hours with like nobody on the road. And we got on these floats, and we rode down that route and looked out of either side of the float and saw this. A lot of people down there. And as our float came by, people were actually chanting, "Who are you? Who are you?" It was a joyous, raucous, wonderful scene there on November 6th of 2009. This is the homecoming dinner, and this is where I got to play with this guy for a minute. We know who that is? It is Bernie Williams, yes. The homecoming dinner happens usually the night before the first home game. For about 3 years, I was asked to go play organ at that, where I played as people were walking in and then played during dinner. They would rent a Hammond organ and have it up there, and I was playing that. At one of these, the keynote speaker was Bernie Williams. And I got to talking to him, and he said, well, I'll do this arrangement of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. You want to play it with me? I said, I'd be honored to, but I don't really know your arrangement. I had heard it. I knew what it was, because he took Take Me Out to the Ball Game and just turned it upside down and turned it into this like melancholy, pensive, thoughtful kind of thing, rather than just this cheer. You know, it had like alternate weird chord changes in it and minor chords and stuff, and it was very interesting. So he got on the horn with somebody who faxed a chart of it over to the Sheraton, and they got it to me, and I played this along with him. So this was his arrangement of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. So that was a thrill. Now, this woman is my wife, Maxine. She's a fabulous piano player. We've been married for 38 years. She plays a little bit of organ, and she played enough to do this for me. That's the old organ from the old Yankee Stadium. That organ was there between 1983 and 2007. It's from a later generation of Hammond where they went in the 70s to this solid state technology because it was cheaper to make the parts and they thought it would be snazzier. But it came to light that A, the organs didn't sound as good as the old technology, and B, they were terribly, terribly unreliable, and C, they were impossible to fix. So if you had one of these organs, its value plummeted like a stone, to the point where these organs from this period, you could find people who will be very fortunate to give it to you. And if they're trying to get money for it, you can't get more than $100 or $200 for this. Even though it says Hammond on it, and it kind of masquerades as a Hammond organ, it's really nothing like the old B3 and that generation of technology. And getting repairmen to fix it, most Hammond repairmen, you call them, you tell them you have an old Elegante or an old Colonnade, they'll go, nope, I ain't going near that. They won't fix it. And if you open the back of it, it's this wall of circuit boards just like slammed together, and you get a headache just looking at it. So nobody wanted these organs. What happened when they got rid of the one at Yankee Stadium, which had been brought in there in '83 by Leighton, and it somehow lasted for over 20 years, but then it got very unreliable. They said we couldn't count on it anymore. They put it up for auction. Somebody bought the organ at auction for $25,000, minus the bench. The bench was an extra $2,500. So he paid $27,000 for an organ that was worth maybe $200. Okay. This organ wound up at the Yogi Berra Museum in Montclair, New Jersey, as a donation. They called me in January of 2008. They said, we just got the old Yankee Stadium organ here. We'd like you to come in and christen it and do a new concert on it, which I would have loved to do, except I had a gig. Have you heard of the folk singer Odetta? Okay. I was booked to do a gig with Odetta, just me and her, in Latvia. So that's where I was going to be. I wasn't going to like pull off that gig. And I said, you really have to have it on this. Yeah, we got to have it on this date. Do you know anybody else that could do it? So I got the perfect person for you. So I sent my wife in, and she did a little concert on the organ there. Nobody knows where this organ is now. We went to the Yogi Museum a few years ago, and nobody knew a thing about it. It just vanished into thin air. But anyway, that's it. Well used. It led a good life. And that's my wife and I on the scoreboard. Now, here's the man of the hour. That's Bob Shepard. We became very friendly ever since the moment I met him, really. Bob Shepard was the public address announcer at Yankee Stadium from 1951 through 2007. His first game in 1951 was a game in which Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle played. It was DiMaggio's last year and Mantle's rookie year. Mantle was in right field, DiMaggio was in center. That was Shepard's first game. He was a speech teacher at St. John's University, which is why he insisted on clear, concise, and correct elocution. And he adhered to that, boy. But he was a prince of a man. I grew to love him dearly. The first time I encountered him was when my first game, April 6th of 2004, Mike Bonner walked me up to the booth and said, here's where you're going to be. We got this for you, that for you. Oh, and you should meet Mr. Shepard. Everybody called him Mr. Shepard. Nobody called him Bob. His wife called him Bobby. But everybody else called him Mr. Shepard, or occasionally Shep if he wasn't around. But if you were in his presence, you just called him Mr. Shepard, not because he demanded it, because he commanded it. So Mike knocks on the door. Mr. Shepard opens the door, stands up. Mr. Shepard, this is Ed Alstrom. He's our new weekend organist. And he stretched a hand out to me and said, welcome to Yankee Stadium. I thought I could have died and gone to heaven right there. That was quite a moment. And then I got to know him really, really well. His office consisted of, which I said was right adjacent to mine, his office consisted of a shelf with a microphone on it and a pedal on the floor which you would step on if you wanted to activate the microphone. There was nothing else in the room. Shep would bring a large novel to him that he had taken out of the library, one of those 1,200-page tomes on something or another. Could be anything. And he'd bring that with him, he'd read that during the game, and then he'd pop his head up to announce the batters. And he would also talk to me during games. He would knock on my window, and I'd come over. When the opposing team was batting, and this was a day and age when I didn't do anything while the opposing team was batting, so I had time off, and he knew that. So he'd knock on my window.
You know, I heard this song on the radio on the way here, and I want to know if you've heard this song before. Left fielder, Manny Ramirez. And there was a singer singing this song. Her name is Joe Stafford. Have you ever heard of Joe Stafford? Right fielder, Trot Nixon. And she was singing a song written by Rodgers and Hart. Rodgers and Hart. And the song was called It Never Entered My Mind. Do you know this song? Catcher, Jason Veritek.
Can you imagine being like privy to that? I was standing there going like, yeah, I know the song. I've heard of Joe Stafford. And it's the same voice, okay? What Reggie Jackson called the voice of God was just that same speaking voice. That's what it was. And his routine at the end of games was a real doozy. So quite frequently the Yankees would have a lead in the top of the ninth inning, and Mariano Rivera would be pitching for the Yankees to try and get the save in that game. So top of the ninth inning, Shepard would announce the first batter, and then he'd stand up, and he'd put his little sweater on, gather his book, announce the second batter, and then he would wave to me, and he would leave the booth and lock the door. Well, the third out hasn't been made yet, okay? If the third out is not made, you'd hear the door open again, and he'd walk back in and look at me and go,
Right fielder, Tim Salmon.
and walk out again. When that third out was made, this man, 94 years old when I met him in 2004, would sprint out of the stadium. And I asked somebody, what is he doing when he leaves there? Because I was still sitting at the organ, even though I had nothing to do. I didn't have a reason to be sitting at the organ. He said, no, he runs out of here. You got to see it sometime. I said, I do have to see this. So one time, I got ready to go when he did, and I watched him, and he was sprinting, like running. This guy's 94, 95 years old. I couldn't keep up with him. He was moving. One time, before a game, he comes up to me, he says,
I've written a poem. Would you like to hear it?
I said, of course I would. So he hands me a sheet of paper, and it's on his stationery. So he had his stationery, the little Yankee logo, and said, from the desk of Bob Shepard. And I think many of you Yankee fans will remember a Yankee pitcher named Kevin Brown, who was with the team in 2004, 2005. Yeah, hold on. Ooh, yeah. Kevin Brown's claim to fame as a Yankee was that in September of 2004, when they were in a pennant race, Kevin Brown had a bad game, came into the clubhouse and punched out a brick wall and broke his non-pitching hand. Okay, this poem was about that. And I'm reading the paper that says, quote, "Oh, Kevin Brown let his team down when he fractured his hand on the wall. Better instead he had fractured his head, then it wouldn't have mattered at all." And he's looking at me to see what my reaction was. I started laughing. This is absolutely great. I said, you must have a few of these. He's, oh, hundreds. I said, you need to get a book created. You need to have a book of these. These should be collated and put in a book. Everybody would buy that book. He said, oh no, Mr. Steinbrenner would fire me. All right, now, here's a doozy. August 18th, 2007, Military Day at Yankee Stadium. Some of you know what goes on Military Day. They honor every branch of the military, and usually they have the Golden Knights parachuting into the stadium and putting on a show there. So there was a 4 o'clock game on a Saturday. This Military Day ceremony is supposed to take place at 3 o'clock. So it's about 5 minutes to 3. I'm sitting at the organ getting ready. The director walks over, knocks on my window, and points to Shepard's booth. And I look over and he's not there. He goes, where is it? I don't know. Now, in the old days, the old stadium, you used to have to go down 2 flights, get on an elevator to get to the food room, so that's probably where he was. So now it's like a minute before 3, and there's nobody at Shepard's booth. And the director comes over, and I don't know how I thought to do this, or it was very out of character for me, but I went, go. So I walked in, door was open. I sat down in Shepard's chair, scoped out where the pedal was, pulled up to the mic. They handed me a script, which I speed read, and then I hear, Alstrom, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Yankee Stadium.
So now, I didn't have time to think about it. So I didn't know if I'd do my full-on Shepard imitation or be me or go halfway. And I kind of went halfway, all right? But I've just recently discovered that, in case you don't believe me, this exists on video. So this is from an old
The Wounded Warrior Project is just one
thing
way
that
that
ran
the
on,
Yankees
yes.
help honor those who fight for our country. Military Appreciation Day is another. The pregame festivities were highlighted on August 18th by a grand entrance from the U.S. Army's Golden Knights. They parachuted into the stadium and landed right on the field. Here's a quick look at their high-flying antics.
Today, the New York Yankees are proud to pay tribute to members of the United States military, and in particular, to the United States Special Operations Command.
Just before the first pitch by Roger Clemens, fans were treated to a spectacular entrance by none other than the Army's Golden Knights.
All right, so that's me. Now, Shep showed up later, but this, just to give you a point of comparison, this is Shepard later in the same.
Today, the New York Yankees are proud to announce that one of their sponsors will be making a donation to the Warrior Foundation.
All right, so this was like a 3-page read, and I'm sweating. Halfway through it, I hear the door open, and I sneak a look around, and he's standing in the doorway. I'm like, oh my God. So I finish the read, take my foot off the pedal, and I turn around and look at him, and he goes,
Were you trying to imitate me?
so, I don't know. I've got some moments. And then the entire game, he spent the rest of the game writing me notes and slipping them under my door about William Morris Agency called. They're looking for somebody to do voiceovers. David Letterman is looking for a new MC. Disney wants people to do a character. And he compiled a list of all these people. He must have passed me like 10 notes, most of which I have in a safe deposit box somewhere. But very witty man. And I did a little gift for him, and he sang me a song he had written, and I did him a track for it, and he sang the song to me, and I spliced his voice over the track, and he was very grateful. He wrote me a lovely note. I also found this in the old organ bench, a song that he wrote along with Eddie Layton about Phil Rizzuto. So these are the lyrics to a song. I never found the Layton's music for it, but we had these words at least. Okay. Any of you see the movie 42, the Jackie Robinson movie? I landed a minor spot in that. My boss cooked it up, and he said, they need something done, they'll call you. So they called me and they said, we have these recordings that Gladys Gooding did in 1944. Gladys Gooding was the organist for the Brooklyn Dodgers during World War II. And she used to make V-discs, which were the 78 RPM records that they would send over to the troops to keep morale up, all right? So these people who were the producers of 42 said to me, we need to get these recreated. We can't use the originals, but we need them to sound exactly like Gladys Gooding played. So they sent me MP3s of the V-discs, which is weird in itself. And so I set about learning to play Take Me Out to the Ball Game and Sidewalks in New York exactly the way Gladys Gooding played them, which is more difficult than you might think. She had a very quirky style of playing, and she played in a very different kind of way. So I had to listen to them a bunch of times, and I finally got it down. And I recorded them pretty high fidelity. I figured they weren't nice quality recordings. I sent them to them. They got back to me and they said, no, we need them to sound exactly like the V-discs. So I said, well, how am I going to get like 1940 fidelity? So you all know what an equalizer is? Okay, a graphic equalizer where you can control every frequency along the spectrum and tailor the sound exactly the way you want to. So I called up an equalizer section and I just spiked everything in the middle, so it would just be like mid-range frequencies and no highs and no lows, nothing else. And that nailed the sound of an old 78. So I sent them that and they were like, perfect. So when Jackie Robinson gets to Brooklyn in this movie, you'll hear the organ, and that's me. This is me with Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks, at an event that went on in the Library of Congress in 2009 called Baseball Americana, where I was on a panel with a hot dog expert and a baseball dictionary author, and we were just talking all kinds of stuff about baseball. And Ernie Banks was the headliner, and he talked for a while, and then he came over to the organ saying, take me out to the ball game, and then he said to me, hey, son, you know, thanks for the memory. Unfortunately, I knew the song, so I played that, and he sang that too. Okay, that's about, I want to leave you with one little snippet here. Okay, this is interesting. When a Yankee player hits a home run, there's this cacophony of noise. In the middle of that noise is a fire engine siren, okay? I like to play this live on the keyboard because I can control it that way. So if I play two notes and I move this, which is called a pitch bend wheel, I can make the pitch go up and down, all right? So I do that on the top keyboard here. Now this video came about, so I just kind of fly that noise out there and they mix it into the melange of sound that's going on while the guys run around the bases and the whole place is going crazy. This particular day was the bottom of the first inning. Eric Capstick, the remote cameraman, and you've probably seen this guy if you've been to Yankee games. He's out in the stands with a remote camera the entire game, and he works the entire stadium. He's remarkable the way he gets around. He was down in Delta to film me at the end of the first inning. They were going to pop me on the scoreboard for about a 45-second little organ thing. Before that happened, though, Gleyber Torres hit a home run with 2 outs. Eric was just waiting to film me when the inning ended, but the inning didn't end. Gleyber Torres made sure of that. See Eric? Now, if you look at the TV behind me, there's Gleyber going around the bases. He's taking his sweet time, too. I don't usually have to do 3 up and down. Leave her milk that one. So, now you could tell your friends that's the way it goes. And let's close off the way we came in here. Here it is on the new organ. Thank you very much.